So the characters are invited on this trip to a remote retreat in the Catskills. And the retreat is actually based on a real life location that full circle moment I found in an influencer's sponsored post. And I saw this location with these giant windows facing out into the woods. And it just felt like such a perfectly sinister, beautiful location. Because I'm the type of person whose imagination goes running and I see something that's a little too isolated and I start to think, it's gorgeous and really peaceful, but if something goes wrong, there's nobody around to come help you. So that kind of kicked off the setting kicked off actually the whole concept of influencers because this location, this retreat has individual cabins that have, again, these giant windows and you can see in, but the people inside can't necessarily see out. And it feels a lot like social media, right? Where you're posting things online, but you don't know who's watching. So it just felt like a really natural fit. And it was really fun to play with. So at the heart of our story is Sydney Kent, who is the it girl. She is the influencer who has made herself a huge success, is making so much money doing influencing and content creation. And it puts her in a position where there's a lot of pressure on her to continue to succeed. And she has a group of people around her that have been contributing to her success. So we have Caitlin, who is the bombshell, who is her good friend that they met a few years ago before the book starts. And Caitlin is really, really ambitious. So she has a lot in common with Sydney in that way. And she also tends to be more cynical about a lot of things. Sometimes Sydney comes across as a little bit naive. And so those two have an interesting conversation. Caitlin is very tell it like it is, sometimes snarky. So you never know what you're going to get with her. And then we also have Lucy, who is the photographer of the group, and she is Sydney's best friend from college. And she's struggling because she's working with Sydney and working for Sydney as a photographer and is really trying to figure out what is her place in the world, especially as she's, a friend, but she's also working for somebody, and that causes a lot of conflict among them. And then we also have Jeff, who is the gym bro, who is Sydney's boyfriend. And we have Nash, who is the stylist there. And we also have Brent, who is the manager. So a lot of the story centers on the women, the men are there, and definitely play an important role. But a lot of this is about those friendships and centering those female friendships.
No.
And yeah, go ahead.
Oh, please continue.
No, I was going to say in the story we hear from three points of view. So we hear from Lucy, we hear from Caitlin, and then we also have the point of view of the reader or the audience. So we see social media snippets that are as Sydney is presenting herself to the world. And we don't get her direct point of view. We get to see what she's sharing with the world versus what's happening behind the scenes. So, hoping as a reader, it feels fun to kind of tease apart the disconnect between, what everybody's saying and what's actually happening. I think, again, the social media, because everybody here is their colleagues, they're all in this social media world and they all have a financial stake in the success of the trip, but they also have their own motives for being there and their own individual business goals. So it causes a lot of conflict, but the fact that they're there as colleagues also introduces this interesting layer of personal and professional jealousy, where because people are having this insecurity, it creates instability between the characters, and they're not necessarily going to be trusting each other, especially because they're all hiding things. They're not also trusting each other's motives, and it definitely lends to that confusion and distrust among them. And I think in general, the social media I started brainstorming the idea. I didn't write it during COVID, but we had been in that period of the world shutting down and the internet and social media was the way everybody was staying connected. And I think it's really interesting to see how much our reliance on that shapes our relationship with each other. And so it was something that I was playing with as I was writing the book. So I definitely was inspired by some of Agatha Christie's works. I don't want to say all of them because I think that can be a little spoilery, but I do think for me, figuring out who was going to die when started from the end. I knew exactly who was going to be behind everything, and again, in that locked room mystery or thriller, you have a limited cast, so you have to have everybody have a plausible motive for harming the other people there. And I think, again, having that business relationship really helped make everybody this like tight web where everybody is connected to everybody else, whether or not they want to be. And I think going back and figuring out the order of things, a lot of it is I wanted it to feel like we were catching you a little bit off guard with the first murder. Really, I wanted characters to have this moment of, it's they're not taking the snow seriously at the time when it starts snowing. They're like, yay, it's beautiful, it's fun, we're gonna have some champagne and party. And by the time somebody dies, they realize that, oh, there's no way out. And now we're stuck with this. Now we're trapped and have that claustrophobic feeling kicking in. So I think it was just trying to figure out what are the right opportunities. And they are influencers. So I wanted to make sure that we're also reflecting what their day to day would be like when they're on this content creation trip where they're intended to deliver images for their client. I think what's interesting with books, having the multiple points of view gave us a really good opportunity to disclose information from those points of view characters, but also cut out at moments where there are gaps on the page where you don't see what people are doing and you're relying on what they're telling other people and what the other characters that they're up to. And you also get a lot of the observation, not just from the character who's the point of view character in that moment, but how do the other point of view characters or even those social media snippets reflect the person who's talking in that moment? And so it kind of introduces some of these disconnects and gaps where not everything is on the page, and it gives you information and insight into different people's motivations, but not necessarily every moment of what they're doing.